password, like assault or whatever, something. Well, so like one thing I know is bcrypt apparently doesn't mean assault. I don't really know much about this, so I may not be doing it justice. But from what I understand, this is kind of what bcrypt is the accepted standard, and this is an implementation of that, and it's not pluggable. And actually, Aaron Patterson called them out on making this not pluggable at Railsconf because we're writing new code that kind of, it's cool, but the architecture of it that makes it less usable for some folks. That said, I wouldn't be surprised if people start making adapters for this. Okay, so really, like, why is this awesome? It's not that awesome. It's just that it's a lot of code that you don't have to write. Is really the point of this.
How old is this? I mean, my question is I mean, I'm very familiar with AuthLogic. I've used it on a couple of projects.
It's easier than ever to build your own AuthLogic.
Yeah.
Right. And Ryan Bates of Railscast fame is a big fan of rolling your own, so you know every piece of it. You know how it all is all in. AuthLogic and Elias and any of the others, they rely on a lot of conventions and there's a lot of magic, and if you don't understand every bit of it, when you veer off the path, it's kind of hard to tell what they're from. In addition, because it uses a lot of the magic, when I upgraded to Rails 3, AuthLogic broke in weird ways that was really hard to diagnose. And I wasn't familiar enough with the problem, so I had to wait for a Rails 3.1 branch to come out. So, I don't know. And nowadays, I'm sort of becoming a fan of rolling it around. Okay, HTTP streaming. Talking to a lot of people who probably already know about this stuff. In the Ruby community, went really long without implementing HTTP streaming. Rails community. So basically, without HTTP streaming, this is how Rails works today. You do a get on some resource, it renders some stuff on the server, and it sends you back an entire section of HTML, an entire page. In which case, the client notices the head tag, and inside the head tag are some scripts, so you can get those. With HTTP streaming, I get the items, he renders, and while he's rendering at given times, he may send back a partial section of HTML. And now, the client already saw the head tag and knows that it needs to go get this asset. Again, it can't render the page yet. It only has the head tag, so you probably don't have the title, right? But I've started fetching this JS file, and meanwhile the render call finishes, and I have the rest of the HTML. Now this could be repeated such that you actually get the header first, and the client starts rendering it, and things like that. Ultimately, the entire time from top to bottom, from the server's perspective, is almost identical. But from the client's perspective, they actually started fetching that JavaScript earlier. And so it actually renders faster. I'm going to skip this demo because it's basically what I just showed you. So the goal here is mainly to render the head tag as soon as possible. There are some gotchas. If you are yielding to a block in your template, what that means is if you have some section, say the sidebar, and then you let templates provide content for the sidebar, so like depending on what template you're on, you might have special links in the sidebar. Rails actually has to wait until you render that entire template to know that you've provided all the content for a specific block. So it's actually collecting it as you go. And if you're streaming, especially if your yield is actually the title, meaning your template is providing the title for the entire page, then it doesn't know when you're done. It has to wait till you finish rendering the entire thing. So here's an example of that. There is a template. It needs to get some content for some stuff, right? So for some named sections of the page. And to do that, it will invoke the layout. The template will provide content for that layout. And once it's all done, you flush. This is the goal, right? In that you don't necessarily need to understand this entire slide, but see there's a lot of flushes. And in order to make this happen, Rails needed to provide ways of providing content for named blocks in the template that once you've provided it is considered complete and then can be flushed. So at any partial or any named block, once it's finished, once you've provided the content for that, it can actually be flushed down to the point. So there's a new syntax for this called provide, and the way you use it is instead of doing like before, I would do yield title, and then in my template, I would do content for title and title. Now there's a provide call, which this will be the only thing used for title. So once this block is finished, it's like I'm done with the title, and now I can render that entire head tag along with the title. Rack wasn't designed with this in mind, so a lot of middleware breaks. Just suffice it to say that you have Rack's APIs basically call with some context, like the request, and then you're expected to return the response code and some body and some headers. If there's code that's like, say, timing how long it takes to do the call, or maybe measuring the response of that call method to see how big the page is, all those things are going to break because call is going to return immediately, and it's just going to start rendering directly to the stream. So a lot of this Rack middleware breaks. So HTTP streaming is, it's one of these things you have to turn it on when it will work for you. And now I've arrived at the sort of the beginnings of what I told you to start with about the asset pipeline. This is my favorite feature of Rails 3. Rails 3.1. And the idea is that I always have a collection of JavaScript, CSS, and images, and they're always sort of dumped in one place, right? In public JavaScripts or public images or whatever. This is from one of my projects. And the thing that's underlined is the only thing that I wrote in this. Everything else is vendor code, right? It's third-party JavaScript. It's important for me to run my application, but it is nice to have things separate. Like I should never edit any of those files, right? Unless there's a new official version of one of those. The only thing I'm really intended to edit is application.js. And why application.js, right? That file is gigantic. It's hard to read, it's hard to edit. Every time I look at it, I get pissed off. But the reason is why slow, right? Why slow tells me I need to make fewer HTTP requests. You can already tell I have a lot of HTTP requests to make to satisfy a single page request. So I don't want to add to that list by providing lots of little JavaScript files for contained JavaScript behavior on my app. So we, as a team, decided to make a conscious decision just to put your code in here, and what we could have done for that is instead take files, package them up together, and then minify them so that they're smaller, like it's suggested here. But it's just an extra manual step that we would have had to take, and there would be some drawbacks. Sprockets is a gem that actually solved this problem. So what Sprockets does is takes your assets, concatenates them into one big file using some rules, and then squishes them, if you're in the production environment, into a smaller file, right, minifying content. So let me show you how that all works. Can everybody see the code just fine? I've created a Rails 3.1 sample app, right? And the reason I did that is because it was the one time I had internet today. So I haven't done anything else to it. So this sample app, is that a good font size? Great. Some new things in the gem file for Rails 3.1 are Sass Rails, Coffee Rails, Uglifier. Pretty awesome name. And in turn, these things depend on Sprockets. So Sprockets is now a dependency of Rails. Okay, so it's built in, but it has some sort of opinions, right? It needs to actually run with a server-side JavaScript environment. It doesn't run in all environments, things like that. But it is pretty awesome. So when I take a look at my project, right, you're familiar with app, controllers, models, views, right? It's standard Rails stuff that's been around since the beginning. But there's a new one called assets. And assets has 3 folders: images, JavaScripts, and style sheets. Okay, so it's a first-class component of our application now. It's almost like Rails has realized that JavaScript has become a gigantic part of our applications. And shouldn't be treated by just toss it in public folder, right? It's a real thing. If I open up this JS file, it's really not for me to edit. I mean, there's some weird comments in here. It's nothing like, let me show you an example of this. If I take and create a new controller, and I'll call this demo, as an index action. And then I take a look over here. Notice it did create a file for me quickly, and I'm actually going to change the name of this file to just JS for a second. And then we're going to take a look at that file. So let me. So I haven't done anything else, right? I just added a JavaScript file in this folder. If I now run the server, and I go to demo index, and I get it. So I never referenced that thing in here. And if I take a look at my layout, all it's doing is adding or referencing an application style sheet and an application JavaScript file. So if I take a look at the actual output generated, in application.js, notice the first thing in here is jQuery. Where did that come from? We weren't referencing it in this system anymore. And if I scroll all the way down to the bottom beyond jQuery, which, holy crap, that's and boom, it's working. There's my code down here. So it's concatenating my code with jQuery and everything else to provide one JavaScript file, which is pretty awesome. Now it's readable. If I were using the production environment, all this stuff would be squished, right, minified. So it's really small. But again, one JavaScript request. And how did it do that? If I take a look at application.js, it's specifically requiring jQuery and jQuery UJS, which is the Rails stuff, all the Rails helpers in JavaScript. And then required tree dot, which requires every JavaScript file. Well, actually not even every JavaScript file. Every file in this folder, including subdirectories. So I can organize them however I want to, and all of these files get concatenated together.
Can this be used in other environments?
Yes. So it's not going to be called sprockets. This technique could be used anywhere. The stuff I'm talking about in a minute, Sass and Coffee, are completely unrelated to Rails. The only thing I'll be talking about here is the fact that they're built in or included by default into Rails. So what this allows me to do is have really fine-grained JavaScript methods that have the same level of code organization tactics that you would apply to any other class. But I don't have to pay that price when we render the web page because it's just going to be one JavaScript request. One thing that kind of sucks here is if you have dependencies between JavaScript files, this required tree isn't going to load them in any specific order. It's just going to be all the files together. So if you need them, I might do something like this and change this to my file, for example, my file, something like that, which would require that one first. You can also require directory instead of tree, and require, like for example, if you have an admin set of scripts and you only want those delivered for admin users, then in this layout you might specifically exclude the admin thing, the admin set of files. And there's actually a Rails cast on that very topic. So an interesting thing though is that it doesn't have to be JavaScript, right? I can take this take this and rename it to ERB, right?
This is at each page load time. You can do it once.
It does it once in cache. If I take a look at in the terminal, I suspend the server and look at the temp folder, there's some cache stuff that's in here. So you can actually tell it to precompile if you use like an asset server, like a reverse proxy cache, and you can take those files and hand it to another server. But for the most part, it's gonna hit it on the first request, generate it all, and save it, and after that you don't have to do that. Start by server again. So what did I do here? All I did is change the file name to include .erb. In fact, I think I did this backwards. This file should have been named JSW. If I load this, it's actually executing the Ruby code before it evaluates the JavaScript. So you can apply transforms in here as well, which I think is pretty awesome. One of those transforms happens to be CoffeeScript and Sass. So that's what I'll talk about next. Okay, so CoffeeScript, which we'll talk about in a second. CoffeeScript was included in the gem file via this like very innocent commit message, and the Rails community freaked out. Does anybody know what this is? Can you tell what that is?
Twitter or something?
No. It is the longest comment thread in GitHub on the entire GitHub. Alright? He included CoffeeScript in the gem file, and people are like freaking out. What? How could you do this? Oh my god. Why couldn't you include Haml too? Blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden meme photos start flying through here. It is incredibly entertaining to read this. Yeah. You saw the leave Britney alone guy?
Yeah.
It's like, leave Rails alone! Yeah, it's awesome.
Where is this?
GitHub. Yeah, if you find that commit, it was in April by Josh Peak. And you could imagine that they were on IRC like, I'm just going to not even explain this. I'm just going to put include CoffeeScript in gem file. Sure enough, people freaked out. So much so that you can actually go to say, do I have to do CoffeeScript in Rails 3.1 at .com? And it says yes. Even though it's a joke, right? But it's kind of like, do I have to use coffee? No, you don't have to use it. Like I just showed you, just delete the .coffee at the end of that file. Everything's fine, right? You can use JavaScript all the time. This is CoffeeScript. CoffeeScript is JavaScript, right? It compiles down to JavaScript. It was written in JavaScript. And it's almost like it appreciates the good parts of JavaScript. Has anybody read the JavaScript reference? O'Reilly's JavaScript reference? It's got the Rhino on it, I think. Yeah. Kind of a dry read, right?
It's about that big.
Yeah, it's this big. Has anybody read JavaScript the good parts? Okay. Yes. It's this big, right? Like it's the same publisher wrote this, right? Here's the reference, here's the good parts. Douglas Crockford wrote it. It's from what I hear, it's a fantastic read. I'm actually embarrassed to say I haven't read it. I flipped through it. I kind of get the concepts behind it, but basically CoffeeScript is written around the fact that if you were writing JavaScript the way you're supposed to write JavaScript, it's even more painful than JavaScript is today. Like most of us don't write JavaScript in the way that we're supposed to. Like we leak stuff into the global namespace. It's just class syntax is very awkward. Things like this. So if you look at the left, it almost looks like Ruby, right? There's no punctuation. It's white space sensitive, so blocks are just indented with that. Notice the square function. So square is a variable that points to a function that takes an argument x, and the body of that function is x times x. Right? There's an implicit return, which is the last line executed in the block. So here we have to say return in JavaScript, but in CoffeeScript, just the last statement that executes return. A lot of stuff just goes away, right? Here's an example of some plain old JavaScript. We've all written code just like this. Document.ready function, div click function, this stuff data. And then you have the standard sort of mustache under frowny guy. I don't know how to interpret that. This is the CoffeeScript version of that. So I kind of cheated actually. The first statement, document.ready, can be shortened to just $, and inside the parentheses you put a function. So that's what I'm doing here. $, no parentheses needed. If just like Ruby, parentheses can be used to disambiguate method calls from inner method calls. But if it's just one, the CoffeeScript ways don't include it. We have this guy, which kind of looks like a hash rocket. Other people are calling it a dash rocket. Why the lucky stiff called it a stabby rocket, or a stabby block, which I kind of like, so I'll call it stabby block. So you just indent, then div.click. Again, this is a function, and you just indent.
Is this jQuery?
This is so the dollar parts of this are jQuery, yes.
What happens if you're forced to use jQuery instead of Tom?
Same exact.
Will that understand?
Yes. Again, it is JavaScript. So anything I write here is compiled down to JavaScript and can reference any other JavaScript file.
Ben, is it actually a tab or is it just space?
It is whatever you choose.
Okay.
And it is actually more forgiving than you think. Like as long as the one block is indented consistently, the next block can be spaces. And the next block after that can be tabs.
Okay.
I don't know. You probably coded an animal before, which is kind of a pain. If you have even some white space, it will just screw at you. I'll skip that complicated example and show you class syntax, which I think is awesome. In JavaScript, classes are really hard. You don't really have the standard class syntax. You have prototype inheritance, so you have to create. And there are numerous ways to create objects as well, which is kind of confusing. And there's reasons why you use one or the other. Since I didn't read that book, I'm not super familiar with why you would use one or the other. But in this case, I have class animal. It has a constructor which takes a name. It can move X number of meters. So when you call the move method, it takes a meters parameter. And notice how I said the stabby block was basically the replacement for the function, but the arguments come before it. So if there are no arguments, then you would have just the stabby arrow. If there are arguments, then you put them in parentheses before the arrow. And there's also no super in JavaScript. If you've ever done like prototype inheritance in JavaScript, there's no way to call super. You have to say this object.prototype.this. Yeah, you've done it before. It's painful. So what does that result in? It means none of us write object-oriented JavaScript. Right? We all cheat and we all throw stuff in little namespace, and it's all procedural, right? Another interesting thing that I didn't say is there's no var keyword anymore. In JavaScript, if you say, in some scope, if you say x equals 5, you might very well be stomping on some global scope, right? And if you declare a variable in global scope, well, guess what? It's in global scope. That's a bad computer science practice. And we've known that for like 40 years. But yet, most people program JavaScript just starting off with declaring variables right there, just in global scope. If you're doing JavaScript in a browser, like most of us are, a good practice is to attach these objects to windows, so they're at least scoped to the window. And even better is if you don't need them to be global, which you probably don't, then wrap the entire thing in a function. Put parentheses around that anonymous function declaration, and then just put a pair of parentheses down at the bottom to call the function you just declared, right? And that basically means that you're going to have scope. Any variables declared in that function are going to be taken care of when that function goes with it. And I have an example of that here in a second. So let me switch over to a different slide deck real quick. So I said a minute ago that writing good JavaScript means we're going to be, we understand what scopes are. We know how to write prototype inheritance for classes. We know what prototypes are, var versus global scope. There's a whole lot of things. Basically, this is what you would write in JavaScript if you were doing an animal class. First, some housekeeping, right? I have a function. I've put every bit of my code inside of a function so that I don't have any global scope anymore, right? Nothing outside of this function can access my state inside of here, which is what I intended. And then I just wrap it in an outer set of parentheses and then call the function, right? It's a weird JavaScript technique, but it helps you protect the global scope. Again, I have animal equals a function. The function has a constructor. It checks to see if the value passed in is null. That shouldn't say max equals Fido, it should say name equals Fido. So it's basically a default value. And then I need to add a method onto this animal class. So I say animal.prototype.makeSound is another function. Right? If you haven't ever done prototype inheritance, this is probably really confusing to you.
Because you're just basically adding make sound to object.
Yep. I don't know. JavaScript is really cool, but this type of stuff it's not like it sucks. There's a reason it's like this, and it's actually kind of cool that it's different than most languages. But most people don't understand it because it's different than most languages, and so they just don't do it, right? So I'm trying to make the argument that if you're writing JavaScript the proper way, it will end up looking like this. And I can't really say I like the way this looks at all. Here's another example, right? Dollar function, right? Remember, dollar is short for jQuery document.ready. So the function inside here will be executed when the document loads. We're going to find the element with ID some object and give it a click handler, which is another function. We're going to declare some variable to sum the value and check to see if it's 5 and flip a switch. And I actually didn't get the chance to finish this, so I'm just going to write that function. Let's see, I want to delete that file. And I'm going to create a new file. App assets. JavaScripts. And I'll call it demo.copy. Demo.js.copy. Alright, so let me copy and paste this stuff in here. And we're going to convert this to CoffeeScript. Okay. So the first thing is I can just do $, arrow. Or if you don't want to use $, you can use jQuery. Everything inside of here is, this is the same thing as saying declaring a function, which is some stuff, and then setting that equal to, function equals, and then calling jQuery at that, right? One, I don't need the parentheses, and the other thing is I can just declare the block in line. So that's why I did that. Okay. So now I want to find the sum object, the ID with the sum object, and then give it a click handler, which is going to be another function. And set x to 5. And then I could call flip a switch if x. Right? It's just less syntax. It's the same thing I'm doing. It gets converted into something that looks just like this. In fact, all that class syntax I showed you earlier in CoffeeScript gets compiled down to exactly what I showed you the JavaScript version was. So writing CoffeeScript means you're writing good JavaScript. How much time do I have left?
35.
3 to 5 minutes?
No, 35.
Oh, 30. Okay. So, whoa, now we're one thing you might do is just declare a bunch of functions and then call them, right? But I kind of want to do this in a way that is, you know, more object-oriented, right? So one thing I want is guessing game class. This class takes a constructor. And anything that I prefix with at is going to be basically a variable, like an instance variable, right? Similar to so one thing I might want to do is set the let's see. One thing let me just do this. I'm going to call a method called reset. Right. This is a little bit weird, but it's basically the same as this dot reset, which I haven't defined yet. So let me call reset here. Here.
But
Yes.
is this the CoffeeScript gem? I mean, CoffeeScript is it only available for Ruby on Rails as a gem?
No.
Or
Let me pause for a second because that's a good question. CoffeeScript is installed by default on Mac with Node. So if you have Homebrew, you can say brew install Node. Node has package manager. npm install CoffeeScript like this, and I use some flag to make it system-wide binary, like that's in my path. That's basically what you have to do to install it. And there's these same directions are all in CoffeeScript. What that gives you is a coffee command, right? And this is like, right? This is exactly like what I showed you, except this is interpreted. So if I do x equal 5, you know, x plus equal 1, it's what you'd expect from a REPL. Control C words. Okay, so Coffee also provides the ability. Let me step out of here and go into my CoffeeScript folder. Here I actually have a public folder, which has a JS folder in there, and there's an app.coffee. So what I can do is say coffee-watch. So basically, don't do it just once. Sit there and watch for changes, and compile it. By default, it will run it and show you the output here. So like console.log, you expect in the jQuery console, for example. Oh, sorry, Firefox console would actually show up in your terminal here because it's actually running. We don't want that. We actually want it to compile a file, and then I can tell it what folder to watch, public JS. And now it compiled this file already. You notice that there was a change there. Compiled it to app.js. Okay, so that's how you get there. When I reset the game, I want to say your guesses are an empty array. What else? We need an answer, right? So I'm going to say answer, and I kind of want, I don't want to do the random number stuff here, so I'm going to create another class. Generator. And I'll do constructor here. And this time I'm going to take the max number, and I'm going to give it a default of 100. Max equal max. Okay. And then I'm going to call next. Next is going to say math.random, or math.floor. Times. I think that's correct. And I need a new generator here. Now, I'm going to give it 250 initially, just so we can see that it'll override. If I don't provide it, it'll override what I want. I want this guy to. This is correct. Okay. So now I have an answer, and now I need a method where you can guess a number. Okay, so this is going to be, I'm going to add that number to my array, and then if my number is the same as the answer, then I'm going to return 0, right? And if I don't need to return 6. This is going to be like your comparison operators, right? If it's higher, I'm going to return greater than 1. If it's lower, I'll return, or it's greater than 0. If it's lower, I'll return less than 0. And 0 is 0. So, let me do this for a second. I'm going to do this outside of the Rails app. I'm going to do it right in here. And I'm just going to move my public JS app.copy into
Coffee.
Coffee one.
Alright. So I should be starting from scratch now. Okay, so I'm going to create a new file. Edit public JS copy. And we'll paste this. So now, if I go back over here and watch those files, it compiled that already. So if I had a syntax error, we would see it right here. And my page is already loading that. But I actually need to do one other thing here. I'm going to move public CSS app.css to app. Okay, so this is the page. And if I take a look at it looks like, basically I have referenced jQuery and app.js, right? I've referenced the CSS file which doesn't exist. And then I'm going to div ID of container. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and this span here. I have a form, whose ID is input form. And I have a guess for the text box. And then I have a spot for message. So now that I'm here, I can actually try this out. So let's say generator. Oh, and you can do string interpolation one for you, which is awesome, instead of concatenating strings together. I'm going to say generator.new. Sorry, new generator. Next. And when I run this, I should actually see something. Let me put this up. Console. Should have seen this in here. Oh, I know why. Anybody know why? I'm no longer watching that file. So this is one thing that I normally would pin this off into another terminal pane until you're running all the time. Alright, so notice how it's generating numbers at the bottom. Right? Okay, so our generator. And again, there's a whole part of this that I would, and that I'm not showing you, which is you can write Jasmine tests in CoffeeScript also, which just make them a lot nicer. So I would actually be doing this stuff for testing instead of console.log, which is not that fun usually. Okay, so now that I have that, I kind of want to have
Ben, in your console, you did new generator, but up in the guessing game, you have generator.new.
Thank you. I hadn't run the code yet, so it would fit.
Okay.
New generator. And by the way, one thing you'll notice is with no args, you have to do parentheses. With some args, you don't have to unless it's not clear to the file. So the CoffeeScript says you don't use them unless you have to. Okay, now I'm going to do some stuff here. jQuery, and again, I could easily put these in multiple files, right? I'm going to find the element with the, or actually I want to create a new name, right? New guessing game. And then I want to know what that number is, the max number. So I'm going to create a method over here called max, which is going to return generator.max. And now I can find the element with ID max number and set its HTML to game.max. If that worked properly, I'm thinking of a number between 0 and 2. Let me change this back.
Then it just just knows where the class ends implicitly. Like when
Yes, indentation aware. So when I outdent, I'm no longer in that scope. Okay, now I mentioned about the CoffeeScript way. It's actually the CoffeeScript way to do away with as many parentheses as possible. So there's an interesting stylistic choice that I start seeing people do, which is to, dollar is just a function, right? So I can easily do $ space max number, ignoring the search bar, right? This is valid. But then I need to call something on that, and so then you just wrap that. So this will look totally backwards to people familiar with jQuery, but this is valid CoffeeScript. Okay, so now that we have that, I need to intercept that form, input form, .submit, which is going to take an event, and I'm going to say e.prevent default. And just to correct this home, I'm going to hit enter, and that's not actually good. I have to do $e here. Input form. That's correct.
Prevent default on the form, you're doing on submit. I thought prevent default was on like key up and key down or something like that.
No, I can handle the form submission and then prevent the default action.
it's like event return values false.
So if you
This would be more convincing if it worked.
If you return false.
Yes, the problem with return false is you could fail by an error earlier on, and then the return false never happens, and then so sometimes you'll notice if like Ajax code you wrote breaks, and then the form submits and the page refreshes, it kind of sucks because then it hides the error in the JavaScript console. When you refresh. Let me peek. So the e.prevent default is exactly like that. Must be missing something.
I think it's be E, it only be E dot prevent default instead of the dollar sign maybe?
That shouldn't matter because I tried it before.
Did you lose scope because you have line 32 or?
That is a good question, but no.
Okay.
Just make sure that's right. I have no idea what I just did to fix this, but it's fixed. Just to prove it to you.
I think the dollar sign in front of that was casting it as a jQuery on there for some weird reason.
You know what? So I did try it first, and then it didn't work. I think maybe I didn't refresh the browser page, so I got false senses. Okay, so this is absolutely working. Okay, so now what happens here? I want to grab the guess in the text box, right? So I'm going to just create a variable called input, and this is going to equal the input box dot, or just the input box, right? Now I can just do that. Right. Is this making your eyes hurt, or do you like it? Cool. What next? The guess is actually input.val, and I need to make this a number. Interestingly enough, in JavaScript, there are weird ways you can get a string into a number. One of them is to like add a number to it, but it doesn't work if it's a string because that's a valid string operator. So what takes precedence here is actually converting one to a string and then appending them together, which is not what you want. Or plus 0 rather would be side effect free. But there's other stuff like you do like divide by 1. It's weird. And then when you look at it, you're like, why are you doing that?
You can do subtraction.
Subtraction would work.
Yeah.
You can do this in CoffeeScript, which I like a lot better. And you'll get NAND if I pass an ASDF to this. So you know, I might do some handling. Okay, so now that I have my guess, I want to check to see so the result is equal to game.guess, my guess. We get rid of those, and this doesn't read very well, so I'm actually going to change that to number. That to me reads a little bit better, I guess. And now I can say if result equals 0, then I can basically output some message, you won. It took you game.guesses. Or is it dot length? And then I want to pass in a color here. So something like green, 0, 0. Okay. Else if the result equals, less than 0. Too low. Too high. So we kind of need a method here called output, which takes message and color. This color has a default value of say some gray color. Taggy block, and now here we're going to find our div, the idea of message. It's CSS to color, and HTML message. So I'm sort of being inconsistent with my use of parentheses here and there. I would say choose one and stick with it. Too low. Too low. 100 is too low. I think I have a bug. because remember I said everything was going to be scoped into a function and then called, none of this stuff is global. So I can't access game, for example, here. There's no way for me to access game here. So if I want to be able to access it, then I'll do window.game. Okay. So now if I open up Firebug here, and refresh, and I output game actually works. So now I can say game.answer, which should actually tell me the answer. Oh, this is one thing that kind of sucks. I'm so used to Ruby, and yeah, this thing looks like Ruby, so I treat it like Ruby. I didn't call the next function. I just returned next pointer to a function. So now answer is a function. That is a really good point to make. I initially did this last night, and I did this, initialize. And I scratched my head for 20 minutes wondering why my code wasn't initialized, and the reason is it's constructor. So there is a drawback to looking a lot like Ruby. Okay, now I should be able to say game.answer. Just 2. Okay, so let me try 1, too low, 3, too high, 2, U1, and 2, 3 misses. All right, pretty cool. How much time do we have left?
It's 2:17.
12 minutes.
12 minutes, all right. Just enough time to learn Sass. Sass is something similar. I don't remember how, I think Gem installed the Sass stuff for me, but this stuff works on Windows also. So you have to figure out, if you're not using Ruby, then you might not use Gem to install it. But basically you get a Sass command, which is the same idea as the copy command. It's got slightly different syntax. So I can say Sass --SCSS, which is my preferred syntax for Sass. If you like Camel, you may or may not hate the Sass syntax because it looks too much like Camel. --watch.
Hey Ben,
Yeah.
what's the difference between Sass and less? I've seen,
Not a whole lot. I like less better, but everybody's sort of gravitating to this. It's not different enough to make me want to like rip out Sass from Rails and put in less. Less to me has a nicer syntax. Ultimately, I've been able to do some pretty awesome things with both. And I feel that aside from the syntax, there's little difference. Okay, so now Sass is watching changes in that public CSS directory. So let me start making some changes in there. Right, I've got this edit app, public CSS app.scss. Right, and here I'm just going to start writing some CSS. Some code here. If you take a look at the terminal, it actually compiled that Sass file, and my page is already referencing it. So it's a little big. I think it's big because it's still a little bit too big. So change that to 2, and then this text is a little hard to read. So I'm going to add a container style here, which real quick, I want to go to that index.html page, and I kind of want to give a title to this game, and I'll call this title. So now, and then after that, I'm going to do another div, and I'm going to just call this inner. See if I can do this in works. So back over to here, my container, I want it to be, say, 500 pixels wide. The margin is 25 pixels in auto, so it's center. And the color, background color, I want it to be some sort of very light color. All right, that's pretty good. This is what you can do with Sass, right? I've come, basically I'm writing CSS, but now I don't want to do container H1, right? This becomes even worse. Let's say I have a link inside of there, then I have to do A1 link. And then by the way, if you're doing CSS properly, you need a pretty little love-hate rule. So I need visited. And then those two probably share a style. And then I have the same thing again over H, and we have A, which is hover and active, right? There's so much duplication. So what you can do here is just say H1, and then I can do A, right? And I can even say hover A, active, right? I mean, it's just nesting. You can go overboard with this, but whatever makes it more readable, you know, that's a win. That's I don't want to link this. All right. So that's, you know, benefit number one. I think it's worth changing one letter in your extension of your CSS file just for this, right? I want this guy's font size only to be slightly bigger, so 2.2. And his color will be slightly different, so it'll be some sort of gray. Which actually would be good. And that looks terrible, so let me change that to this. Thanks. Still way too big. This is too big. Okay. Inside here, I need some padding. So let's say 10 pixels, 4 pixels. Text around the side. You notice I'm refreshing and it hasn't quite compiled yet, so there is like a little bit of a delay. Now I want to grab the inner. I want to give this guy some padding. Let's say 25 pixels. Okay. Here's where other things get interesting. Let's do rounded corners. So if I want to do rounded corners on my container, does anybody know CSS3 rounded corners? Border radius. Border radius, let's say 6 pixels. Right. And I do that, and it doesn't work. Oh, that's because I'm using Firefox. Border radius, 6px. Oh, and it works, and it doesn't work for WebKit, so let's do that. And I'll say it again. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Internet Explorer people can just live with square letters. I don't. That's a change I don't care about. What else? Okay, what's wrong with this? It sucks. It really sucks. I'm going to copy this basically, and I also have my input technical text, or actually I called it input text box. Right? I want to have that guy have round corners. So now we're going to change that to 3 pixels. And it is working. It's pretty terrible, but whatever. I'm not a designer. Okay, so we have, not only is it crappy, we have duplication here, but then duplication of this type of thing everywhere in our code. So what you can do with Sass is add a mixin of rounded corners. It takes an argument called radius. Let's say 6 pixels. And then at that point it's just a style. So let's just paste in that stuff. And then clean this up. This is going to instead be dollar radius, which is pretty cool that you have. So I'm trying to do this within stuff.
So you need to make good use, so you need to make better use of your W and B buttons there, guy.
What?
W and B,
What is W and B?
forward and back by word. Instead of you hitting that button and just scrolling across.
Awesome. Oh, that's cool. All right. Sorry, I overreacted there for I am calm. Okay, so let's say yes, I use the arrow keys up. Include rounded borders. All right. Does it work? I didn't actually watch this test fail, but I'm gonna guess. I'm going on a limb.
just begin with.
So this number would be, so you can change the form. Yeah. So let's say 10 pixels. Which,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, all right. So cool. Big win already. Now let's put it here.
Ben, so
Yes.
is this inheritance of the, I don't know, like the styles feature of CSS3, or is it Sass converting it to multiple?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Let's
How
be
much of
helpful.
this is CSS3 and how much of this is Sass?
Yeah.
Kind of the question. Okay, everything I've typed except for these things and these things. So dollar signs and dollar signs and @ signs and the nesting. That's Sass. This stuff, CSS3 provides us that. Unfortunately, nobody's agreeing yet. They're kind of agreeing. This is the same exact command, right? They're just unofficially agreeing and prefixing it, so we don't get in a whole war again about browser support for whatever features.
What are they going for nested styles then?
CSS12, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, now that we have this, I'm not so concerned. Like, we can extend CSS. Like, the other thing is I can have variables. Like this color here, if I was going to use that color multiple places, just declare a variable at the top. Right. There's other mixins you can use, and I'm just going to steal one over here. Shadow. Yeah. What's the variable syntax? Let's just do that. Dollar sign. My color. My color. I think it's colon 2228. Yeah. And then I can go down here to this. Oh, I haven't shown you the coolest part.
You have a minute.
I have a minute?
You have a minute.
Oh.
Probably less than, but I got anybody's gonna kick you off.
All right. My color. Okay. Remember how I made this weird color here, and I just guessed it? But I kind of want that to be a similar color as this. So let me change that actually to 340. That's the nicer one. And now this we use my color. And then down here, instead of this, I'm going to say darken my color 25%. And that's a little bit drastic. Let me change that to 1. Yeah. I don't know if you can tell, but it's darker blue. All right. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome. Gradient syntax. I was messing something up last night, and I couldn't get it to work. And it's not because of Sass. It's because I don't understand these. But basically, you can create a gradient syntax pretty easy. Has anybody ever seen getflow.com? Getflow is like a sharing task management app. The design is awesome, and I tried to see how much I could replicate it without using images, using Sass, and the answer was really, really well. All the gradients they did did, all the shadows I did, all the text effects, all of it was done with either color functions and these mix-ins. And I had one image for the texture background of the site. But other than that, like, it kind of mimics the Mac look feel. So that's Sass. It's really cool. I like the SCSS syntax, which looks like CSS, and you can basically take an existing CSS file and just move it over. If you like Haml, there's a Sass syntax, which gets rid of the curly braces and is indentation sensitive. But the reason I don't like it is it looks too much like Haml, so I forget which file I'm in, because I use Haml sometimes. I don't know, for me, I don't like it. Any last questions?
CSS3 everywhere now.
Yeah, I mean,